Hi, I'm Theresa and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my reading goals for 2022 as well as 22 books that I would like to read this year. Now, last year I picked out 15 books and read 6, so I'm hoping for something a bit better this year. We shall see when it comes to the end of the year, but I have high hopes for this TBR because I'm really excited about all of these books. So yes, without further ado, let's just get into the video. So I've kind of divided my reading goals into reading and Sappho's library goals to do with my content. And the kind of main goal I have for both of these is just to fall back in love with reading, with content creation, with just the book community in general. Like, I felt like I was really missing that last year, and I just want to get back to that point and love it all again and just have so much fun. Also in reading goals, I want to read 60 books. This is the same goals I set last year and I read 100, so I'm hoping I can kind of surpass it again, but I'm going to be busy this year, so I don't want to set too high a goal and kind of struggle to hit it. I want to be able to hit it quite easily and not have to pressure myself. Another goal is one that I had last year as well, which is to read more from Latini authors. So if you don't know, I study French and Spanish and Latin American studies, and as part of my Spanish and Latin American studies course, there's obviously a huge focus on learning about the culture and the history of Latin America, and I want to kind of bring that into my reading and prioritise reading from these authors. I did read quite a few last year, but not as much as I would like, so I want to kind of just continue that this coming year. And there's so many books that I have on my TBR, so I'm very excited to read some of them. Also, kind of leading on from that is to read diversely, and I don't just mean reading queer books, I mean reading books by authors of colour, books with disabled characters, as well as just queer books, because I have quite a bad habit of only finding my diversity in queer books. So queer books by authors of colour, yes, but what about just books by authors of colour on their own? So I'm going to try and prioritise that. I don't know if I've explained that very well, but just reading diversely, not just queer books, is my goal. And just reading what I enjoy. Don't let others dictate what I read. Don't buy into hype when it's not something I want to read. All of that just to try and help me with this goal of falling back in love with reading. And my goals for Sappho's library are to not overwhelm myself with review copies. I have done that the past couple of years and it's gotten quite stressful. It's just sucked the joy out of reading, and I just don't want to do that again. And I feel like last year, with letting some of them go past their release dates for the first time, has kind of let me know that it's okay to do that they're not going to burst into flames if I don't read them in time. So I'm trying to take that energy into 2022. Although I will prioritise them, I don't want to overwhelm myself and put pressure on myself with them. And that's my other goal, is to just not put pressure on myself to read at all, because I just want to enjoy it. So yeah, those are my kind of reading and content creation goals for this year. Just falling back in love, uploading, reading consistently. Hopefully it's going to be a great year. Next up, the TBR. So I have got this divided into 3 sections: books that I own, books that I do not own, and 2022 releases, which obviously I also don't own. So to start it off, let's do the books that I own first. So first up we have got The Starless Sea by Arent Morgenstern. So this was on my TBR last year and I didn't read it, but I will read it this year. And do you know how I know that? Because I'm nearly finished it already. It was my first book of the year. I will be finished by the time this video goes up, and I'm just very, very excited to be finally reading it after buying it a couple of years ago, and I'm really, really enjoying it as well, which is also great. I cannot wait to read the last kind of 100 pages and see how it wraps up. So this follows Zachary, who one day picks up a book in the library. It's kind of a mysterious book. It's not got an author's name on it, but he reads it and he discovers that there's a story in this book, this kind of short story collection, that's about him. But this moment from his childhood that he's never told anyone about, but here it is written plainly on the page. And his kind of, this obviously piques his interest, and he begins to try and figure out who wrote this book, where it came from. It's not registered in the library. There's all this mystery surrounding it, and this eventually leads him to this idea of the Starless Sea, this library hidden underneath the world, underneath the earth, full of books, this secret community. It's got all these wonderful vibes. I really am enjoying it so much. Zachary is also gay, and it's like a very minor part of his character, which I'm quite enjoying. And there is a bit of a romance though, which is also very fun. and I'm just loving this kind of weirdness and never knowing what's going to happen next, and just confusion, to be honest, but like impeccable vibes. It's really fun so far, and I'm glad I'm enjoying it after finally picking it up. The other reason I put this on my list is to kind of be representative of the books that I have left that I bought or received, but I think most of them were bought before 2020. I have 6 of these books left. I had like 16 last year, so I'm making good progress on them, but I want them gone because a lot of them just don't reflect my reading taste anymore. This was kind of this one and like one other are the only ones that really do. So I'm hoping I can just get through them this year. We shall see. Next up we have got The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I just am ashamed that I have not read this yet. I bought it just this past year and I just want to finally pick it up and read it and know the story that everyone seems to love so much and is so widely read and popular and so important as well, and I just want to read it. That's it. So this follows Star, who witnesses a police brutality killing of a black man, I think her friend, and she gets very much caught up in the proceedings following it with some riots and protests and such, and I'm just very intrigued to read it and finally understand the hype. I also want to watch the film. I've never got around to it either, so that's all in my agenda for this coming year. Next up is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. This is the final Alice Oseman prose book that I've not yet read, the final Alice Oseman book. So I want to read it and love it. I've seen so many people recommend it. It seems to become the most highly recommended of all of her books, so I'm very intrigued to see what I think of it. I think it's going to be really good. So this follows Frances, who is a bit of a study machine. She's not going to let anything get in her way, but then she becomes friends with Aled, who's the host of, I think, a radio show, and they obviously become friends and become closer, and when this kind of trust between them is broken, Frances has to confront some demons from her own past. And I just think it sounds very good. I have loved the other Alice Oseman books I've read, so I've got very high expectations for this. I hope I'm going to love it. Next up is Sweet and Bitter Magic by Adrienne Tooley. This is a sapphic YA fantasy standalone book. It's got witches. I have been very highly anticipating it, but just never got round to it last year, so I want to make sure I do definitely read it this year. I just think it's going to be fantastic. It's got like grumpy sunshine vibes, enemies to lovers, all of that goodness. I'm very excited about it. So this follows 2 perspectives, Tamsin and Wren. So Tamsin was the most powerful witch of her generation, but when she breaks the rules, she's punished and she is not able to feel anything anymore. The only way she can feel things is to steal feelings from others. And so she meets Wren, who is a source, a rare kind of person who is a source of magic, and Tamsin can take her feelings without it draining Wren, and the two of them begin to work together as Wren tries to find the cure for a plague that is going to kill her father. And they work together, it's enemies to lovers, it's going to be fantastic. I'm so excited to read it. I cannot wait. Next up I have got All Boys Aren't Blue by George N. Johnson. This one is intimidating to me because it is non-fiction and I don't really read non-fiction, but I put this on my TBR because I want to start. And I thought this would be a great place to start. It's short, it sounds very good, and I can't wait. So this is a memoir from George M. Johnson following their childhood growing up black and queer, and it just sounds like it's going to be very moving. I don't know too much about what happens or anything in it, but I have heard only amazing things about this, so I've got very high hopes. The next books I own, but as ebooks, and the first of those is Neon Gods by Katie Roberts. This is a adult romance. It's got a Hades and Persephone retelling theme to it. I think both characters are bi, so it's also queer, which is cool, and it just sounds very good. I've heard amazing things about it, so I have very high hopes. I have to say that I don't know too much more about the plot other than it's Hades and Persephone, but that's enough to sell me because that's such a fun myth to play with, and I think it works very well for a romance. This is kind of representative of me wanting to read more adult romance this year. I began reading some last year and I've really enjoyed them, so I want to continue that this year and kind of branch out of YA a bit because I'm finding that YA romances just aren't always giving me everything that I want, and adult romance is. So that's that. Next up is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. I picked this as my book club read for September and October, but then had to sadly stop the book club because I just didn't have the time or the energy to keep up with it. So I never got around to reading it, but I will finally read it this year, I hope, and I've heard amazing things. People seem to have really enjoyed it, so I want to enjoy it too. This is a queer lyrical reimagining of the rise of the founding emperor of the Ming Dynasty. It's got kind of Mulan and Song of Achilles vibes, which I am sold on. That sounds incredible, and I just cannot wait to read it. It's queer, it's sapphic, it's gonna be great. Next up is a book I own as an ARC, and that is If This Gets Out by Sophie Gonzalez and Cale Dietrich. And this book is like a boy band book, which I've been craving after reading I Was Born for This recently. So I'm very hyped to read this. You follow two members of a boy band who begin to fall for each other and how they have to deal with this as a boy band and their label not being very supportive. And it sounds like it's gonna have lots of insider knowledge on the industry and everything, which sounds very cool. And I'm very excited to read it. I've heard amazing things. And since I have an ARC, I will definitely read it, so I'm kind of cheating by putting it on this list, but there we are. And finally on this section is Iron Widow by Ziran J. Zhao. This is another YA sci-fi. It's also inspired by Chinese history, but this time it's like in a sci-fi world. You've got mechas and stuff. It's a very patriarchal society, and you follow a female main character who's trying to avenge her sister's death under the society, and it's got polyamory and bi characters, and it sounds incredible. I've heard the best reviews for it. Everyone seems to think it's phenomenal, so I'm very excited to read it and also love it myself. Next up is the books that I do not yet own, and the first one I want to talk about is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This was in my TBR last year and I just never got around to it, and I'm so upset because I so want to read it. I've been trying to hunt down a UK hardback but so that I can have the first and the second book matching, but I can't find one. So I've been kind of putting off reading it until I can find one. But I'm so excited to pick this one up. This is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but set in 1920s Shanghai between rival gangs. There's some kind of weird supernatural entity. I don't really know much about it, but it's wreaking havoc in the city as well, and they have to team up to stop it, and it's just so well loved, so well received that I cannot wait to read it myself and hopefully love it too. It sounds amazing. I've seen like little quotes and excerpts from it, and it just sounds so damn good. The next book I want to read is The Last True Poets of the Sea by Julia Drake. This is a YA sapphic contemporary novel, and it just sounds so gorgeous and heartbreaking. It deals very heavily with mental health as well. This follows Violet, who is shipped off to Lyric, a town that her grandmother founded after her brother attempts to take his own life. And there she decides she's going to find the shipwreck of the ship her grandmother arrived on, the Lyric, as well. And she meets a fellow wreck hunter, another girl, and they of course begin to have some feelings. And it just sounds so gorgeous and moving and emotional, and I've heard amazing things. I've been wanting to read it for a while now, so I just want to make sure I prioritise it this year. Next up, I want to read The Witch King by H.E. Edgman. This book came out in 2021, but I didn't get a chance to pick it up, so I want to make sure I can this year, especially as the sequel, the final book in the duology, I believe, is coming out. So this follows a trans witch who has run away from his royal fae fiancé, but when he's hunted down by his fiancé, he has to choose between marrying him, his ex-best friend, and saving their kingdom, or making a deal for his own freedom. And I'm just so intrigued by the synopsis. I've heard amazing things again, so I cannot wait to pick it up. I hope it's going to be absolutely wonderful. Next up, I want to read The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This book has been on my TBR since it came out, and I've just never gotten around to it, so I definitely want to make sure I do this year. That you can hear that there's a familiar story here of me just not getting around to books I want to read. But, you know, it's the life of a bookworm. So this is this lovely found family, soft, emotional queer book. You follow a man who works in the Department for Care of Magical Youth, and he is sent to an island orphanage to monitor the care of some magical children there, and there he falls in love with them and with their caretaker, another man, and it just sounds so soft and emotional, and I've seen so many people love it, so I want to love it as well. Next up, I want to read This Poisoned Heart by Callan Baron. This was the first in a YA contemporary fantasy duology, and I am just so intrigued by the concept of it, and I didn't get around to it this past year, so I really want to in 2022. So this follows a main character called Bree, who has the ability to grow plants and with magic. And when her aunt dies and leaves her this old estate, her and her parents set off there for the summer, but things aren't quite what they seem, and Bree begins uncovering the secrets of this place. There's also a sapphic romance, which we love to see, so I'm just very, very intrigued to be reading this, and I think it's going to be great. It has like, is it the Secret Garden vibes, but with a bit of mythology as well, which just has really, really intrigued me, and I cannot wait to read it. So next up are the books that come out this year that I want to read. First up is, of course, I Kissed the Starwheeler by Casey McKiston. This comes out in May, and I cannot wait. If you don't already know, I'm a big Casey McKiston fan. I gave both of their books 5 stars. One Last Stop became my personality for a while. She just has me in a chokehold. Okay? I cannot wait to read I Kissed the Starwheeler. So this is a queer ensemble rom-com following 18-year-old Chloe, who almost has the valedictorian title in her grasp when her rival, small-town princess Starwheeler, vanishes after kissing 3 people: her quarterback sweetheart, the bad boy next door, and Chloe. Now the 3 must work together to follow Star's clues, but secrets uncovered along the way could wreak havoc at their conservative southern high school. Sounds so good, and I just love Casey's humour and writing style and everything, so I'm very excited to see how this translates into YA and hopefully find another new favourite book. So next up is Ophelia After All by Raquel Marie, which comes out in February. This is so exciting because it's written by Rocky from Blonde with a Book, who was on YouTube for a while. I don't think she is anymore, but it's just very exciting for her. And this is a queer YA coming out and coming of age story with a Cuban American main character who is also queer, and it just sounds absolutely incredible. It sounds like it's gonna really like hit me home as well, and oh, I cannot wait to pick it up. Next up is The Ones We Burn by Rebecca Mix, which comes out in autumn at some time. I don't think there's a release date yet. This is a YA fantasy, and it follows a Youngblood witch's mission to assassinate her betrothed, a gentle human prince, which gets complicated when they uncover a witch-killing plague, and in the race to stop it, she falls in love with the prince's sister. So it's dark, it's witchy, it's FF fantasy, it's got a himbo lesbian witch, and lots of chaos. I've heard the best things about Ranka, this main character, from just Rebecca's Twitter and such, and it's got me so hyped to read it. Cannot wait. So next up is Delaila Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. This is a sapphic adult rom-com. It sounds so damn good. Can't wait to read it. It follows Delaila Green, who swore she'd never return to her hometown. She's very happy with her photography career in New York, but when she's pressured to go back for a strange stepsister's wedding to be their photographer, she decides she's going to have a bit of fun with it, especially when she meets one of the bridesmaids. And so the two begin hanging out and trying to save her stepsister from her horrible fiance, and they just also begin a bit of a romance, and it sounds very good and fun, and just I love the cover as well. It sounds like it's going to be an amazing book, and this is out in February as well. Next up is Wild and Wicked Things by Francesca May, which comes out in March. This is a sapphic The Great Gatsby, but with witches. Like, come on. Like a Nick and Gatsby pairing, but sapphic. And there's lots of decadent parties, blood magic and jazz age goodness, and found family, which is like a recipe for my heart. I can't wait for this. It's going to be incredible. This is so highly anticipated for me. It's going to be so damn good. Next up we have got Youngblood by Sasha Lawrence, which is due to come out in summer. This follows teen vampire Kat, who transfers to an elite vampire boarding school where she is drawn into a dark conspiracy at the heart of vampiredom, and she suddenly finds herself falling for her roommate, Taylor, Kat's childhood friend and the school's only out student. So it's childhood friends to lovers, one of my favourite tropes. Vampire boarding school with lesbians, and just Sounds so good. I cannot wait for this. I've been kind of loving vampires recently. I'm ready to go back to that paranormal YA stage we had in like what, the early 2010s after Twilight. Oh, I'm craving that. It's good fun. So I'm just really excited to pick this book up. Next up, we have got the Sunbear Trials by Aidan Thomas, author of Cemetery Boys. And this just sounds incredible. It's a Mexican-inspired fantasy with kind of a Percy Jackson theme because you've got semidioses, demigods, and just it's gonna be so good. They all have to compete in a trial. There's queer, it's trans, it's gonna be fantastic. I'm so excited for a new Aidan Thomas book. Yes, I say that knowing I haven't read Lost in the Neverwoods. I will also read that at some point. Oh, just there were so many good books out last year that I just couldn't keep up, okay? That's my excuse. But yes, this book sounds incredible. I'm very excited to read it. And finally, we have got Babble, or the Necessity of Violence, an Arcane History of the Oxford Translators' Revolution by R.F. Kuang, the author of The Poppy War. And this one is kind of tentatively on this list because I keep veering wildly towards being like, I'm not going to like this book, or I'm going to love this book and it's going to become my personality. So we'll see what happens when I read it. But this comes out in August and I am very, very hyped. It comes out just before my birthday, so like if anyone's looking for a birthday present for me. But no, this sounds very, very good. It takes place in Oxford in the early 19th century, and you follow a boy who joins the Translator Society and discovers that this Translator Society has a big part in the kind of colonial ruling of Britain's colonial properties and conquering them and everything, and this doesn't sit well with him, and there begins a revolution. And that's a very, very simplified synopsis. I encourage you to read it for yourself, but it just sounds like it could be fantastic. As someone who studies languages, translation, this sounds like I could really, really love it, love that aspect of it, because I think it's got some very interesting takes on translation as a tool of colonialism as well, which sounds very cool, and I'm just very hyped to read it, but also very intimidated by it. So yes, that has been 22 books I want to read in 2022. I hope I can get to these. I hope I do better than I did last year. It's not like it's going to be hard with only 6 books read, but these books all just sound incredible to me, and I really, really want to pick them all up and give them a go. And yes, you'll find links to all of these books down on Goodreads below, as well as my social media if you want to keep up with me elsewhere. And yes, thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in another video soon.